Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, Minister, Chairman, Professors, citizens, I'm honored to welcome you all to the University of Copenhagen to this Citizens Dialogue and Roundtable debate. I must say that I'm especially delighted to see you, Commissioner. It's certainly not every day that we enjoy the visit from an EU Commissioner, such as yourself. And I'm delighted to welcome you not only as a high-ranking official, but also as a personal friend. Welcome. Today we have gathered some of the sharpest national and international minds and decision makers to engage in public dialogue. It's a unique chance for Danish citizens to express their wishes and concerns regarding higher education, research and innovation in Europe. We are here to discuss some of the critical factors that will be needed to bring Europe's citizens safely into a brighter future. The future is the focus of our debate, but as we all know, the future relies heavily on the past. Therefore, I do find it very fitting that our debate takes place in the old ceremonial hall of the university, where prominent scholars of the past, such as Hans Christian Ørsted, Ludwig Holberg, and Tycho Brahe, can look down upon us as witnesses. These three alumni from the University of Copenhagen have made great contributions to society through their scholarly activities. Ørsted, whom you can see over there, discovered electromagnetism together with a German colleague and was also, by the way, the one who found the recipe for purifying aluminium. Holberg, whom you can see over there, was basically the founder of modern Danish literature, by the way, born in Norway, and was a true European literate long before the invention of Erasmus and Marie Sklodowska-Curie programs. He studied at the Sorbonne University in Paris, which, by the way, he reached by foot, and at the University of Oxford. And finally, Tycho Brahe, whom you can see over there behind me, was literally a star scientist of his time, residing in both Copenhagen, Leipzig, and Prague, and the personal owner of one of Europe's largest research infrastructures at that time, the Astronomical Observatory at the island of Hven. The picture, by the way, depicts the visit from the Scottish King James VI. So these icons of European scientific and cultural history are not only witnesses, they also bear witness to the main messages today, that open international collaboration is an essential part of excellent science, and that research-based innovation and education is a prerequisite for the development of a secure and successful European society with a high quality of life for its citizens. I hope that we all share this view and that we can agree that it is indeed worthwhile to invest in research, innovation, and education in the future. The next big question is then obviously, how should we develop European research and innovation for the future? And what should be the role of the EU? I trust that we'll get some qualified perspectives and answers to these questions today. My personal opinion is clear. The EU has a very important role to play. Diversity is a particular strength of Europe. Some may see it as a challenge, but I firmly believe that under the right circumstances, our diversity is an advantage for education, for research, for innovation, and for the development of new products and services, and the Union has a very important role to play in that regard. I also believe that the development of the European research area, the ERA, has made huge positive contributions to Europe. The program has created new scientific relations and collaborations between European researchers, which would not otherwise have been. And thanks to the framework programs for research and innovation, Europe has managed to stay on top in the global competition for the best ideas and for the best minds in research. But obviously, we cannot rest on our laurels. We must strive to make the best possible use of our investments in research, both at national and at European level, and to increase the impact of our research and our innovations. The Commission has moved things in the right direction with its recent openness agenda, and we should continue to follow that path, focusing on openness and excellence in research and on maximizing its societal impact. And it should be supplemented with an enhanced focus on bringing research and education closer together. After all, it is through the universities' research-based education we best prepare the next generation for an unpredictable future. With these words, I'm pleased to give the word to an alumnus and a very good friend of this university, our Minister of Research and Education, Mr. Søren Pind.
Thank you, Rector. Thank you for opening this beautiful hall for all of us. In these halls of knowledge, it is almost inevitable to feel a bit humble, even me, stunned by the amount of brain power having passed through a room like this throughout history. But then I find comfort in the words of one of the greatest scientists of all time, Albert Einstein. He once uttered, "Well, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research, would it?" That might sometimes, I think of that very often when I discuss the government policy. But when even Einstein was lost from time to time, I guess it's okay for us mortals to be as well. Before we begin our debate, I would like to add a warm welcome to the members of the panel and everyone here today. I'm eager to engage in debate with such a distinguished panel, and I'm excited to hear the perspective of our commissioner. Indeed, we're fortunate to have you here, Carlos. You're always enthusiastic about the role for research and innovation and dedicated to making a difference for the future of Europe. I am therefore proud to be among you today. I think I'm not making an understatement if I say that in this room right now, we have gathered a group of people who have one of the most important discussions in terms of what really matters for the future. Because the future depends on education, research, and innovation, the very issue that you take interest in. So, today, as a warning, we will be using technical terms such as mission-oriented approach or incremental innovation. But it is obvious but it is obviously the future we will debate. Research will continue to define the world we live in, and research must be strengthened even more to answer some of our modern dilemmas. The frame for our debate is therefore complex. As Europeans, we face challenges in terms of climate change, health, energy consumption, just to name a few. But right now, the European Union also finds itself in a peculiar geopolitical situation. Turning to one side, we find the US putting itself first in the name of self-protection. Turning to the other, we find China putting itself first to be more active on the global scene. And in the EU, we are negotiating Brexit, facing demographic changes, and we see the uprise of political extremes. Technological development also challenges the way we live and work. To speak of a fourth industrial revolution almost already seems outdated. We must realize that it has already happened, when half of the world's population now has access to the internet. Artificial intelligence and big data offer opportunities relevant to all spheres of life in manners we have never seen before, and modern battles take place online through technology. Should we despair? Of course not. Not if we continue to make the right priorities in our research and innovation policy. The Commission often says that we have built a research powerhouse in Europe. I am proud that Danish researchers contribute to this. Denmark has a high level of participation in the framework program, and remarkable results are being delivered. I hope we can continue on this quest. It is important that we, through sound policy, high-quality education, and excellent research, continue to innovate, support markets, improve welfare, protect privacy, all at the same time, and this can actually be done. Based on the principles of excellence and a solid long-term perspective, European research has achieved remarkable results. It is not the time to throw this overboard. It is the time to complement it. We need to continue to have trust in European research. We need to speak up for Europe, and we need to make it easier for most of our qualified researchers to gain access to the programs. So this is the ambition for the Danish government, that more Danish researchers will conduct scientific research worthy of a Nobel Prize. And I will be more than happy to lend this ambition to the rest of Europe. So now, Carlos, I look forward to hear how the Commission views the future. And I hope that you can share some thoughts on the coming program proposals before we begin our round-table debate. I hope for a fruitful debate in the name of science, knowledge, and innovation. And it is my privilege to welcome you, not to the floor, but to this chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here for so many reasons, but basically to see very, very good friends. And as a very good friend, I asked Henrik, so when we go to this citizens dialogue, will be something informal? And he said, oh, totally informal. You just go to something like this and you speak. But I was very lucky to meet Henrik Wagner at the beginning of my tenure as a commissioner. And he was one of these people that wanted to give back to Europe his time, and he gave it in a great way. He was one of the first scientific advisors of Europe, and so I'm very happy to be here. Then with my friend Lieke Vries, where is she? She's there, and she also another really good friend, and she was very inspiring in giving her time to create a report with a vision for the future. And I thought that the vision should be done by people that are not just scientists, people that can make that link in between politics and science, and she did a great job. And of course, my dear friend Jim Snabe, also present here today, really an inspiring friend, so many things that I've learned from him. Flemming Besenbacher that invited me 2 years ago, and I was here with him, and also really a good memory. And also to Søren, that we just really had the opportunity to speak today, and to really congratulate you for your job as a politician and also everything that you've done for science and innovation. I thought about this citizen dialogue in not just about science. I thought about telling you, probably starting by a story, and out of that story we can have a conversation. What are the big problems that we have today? What are the big challenges as a society that we are confronted with? I think that we have a big problem that we don't want to face reality. And the reality is that 30 years ago, Europe was 30% of the wealth of the world. The United States were also 30% of the wealth of the world. And China was 2%. And today we are roughly 20%. The US is also roughly 20%. But China is almost 20%. And so we were the center of the world, right? Looking at these paintings and looking at this university, and we were the center, and suddenly we're not anymore the center of the world. And we don't understand why. And that's that confrontation with reality that makes it very difficult. And I think that probably the best example is that we were basically, at the beginning of the times, we were not the center at the time. And so why Europe became the center of the world? And one of these days I was with another really good, really inspiring politician, Carl Bildt, and he was telling the story about my own country. And I think that when you think about Portugal, when you think about the history of Europe, and you think about in the 1400s, the Chinese had better boats than the Portuguese and the Spaniards. Zheng He was a general at the time with the Ming emperors. He had basically 28,000 men. The boats that Zheng He had in the 1400s were 5 times bigger than any boat that existed in Europe. And Zheng He went and discovered everything. He went to the Pacific, he went to Africa. He basically went into the Pacific almost to the United States. And he did it for 30 years, 7 amazing trips where China discovered the world. But by 1430, the emperor changed his mood. The emperor was 7 years old, so it was not the emperor, it was people around the emperor. And he changed his mood, and everybody said, no, let's stop these trips. Let's just not do it. This is too dangerous to go and really get influences from outside. And they stopped everything. They basically, there's very little records of this part of the history because they basically burnt most of the documents. And suddenly, China stopped and went into isolationism, protectionism, and that took them 400 years to come back. But a couple of decades after that, the Portuguese really on that really west point of Europe, with very little boats and very little people, and a technology that was not as good as the Chinese, they just saw that as an opportunity. And that opportunity that the Portuguese and the Spanish started at the time was the moment when the centrality of the world came to Europe, because before that was not there. And as I was just looking here in my Kindle to one sentence in a book from Ian Morris called Why the West Rules for Now, that Carl Bildt showed me, that I think defines it. He said, but with the benefit of hindsight, it is tempting to see that 1430 as perhaps the decisive moment in the world history, the point when the Western rule became possible, at just the moment that the maritime technology began to turn the oceans into highways linking the whole planet. Prince Henry, the Portuguese prince, grasped the possibilities, and the Emperor Zheng Tong rejected them. Here, if anywhere, the great man-bungling idiot theory of history seems to accomplish a lot. The planet's fate hung on the decisions these two men made. And I think that the decision that we have now in Europe is that if we want to get back that centrality, we have to think what are the oceans of today. And the oceans of today is science and innovation, and is investing more in science and innovation. And so that's why we have, and you have the responsibility, you as students, you as researchers, to tell your governments in different places of Europe, and I think that here you're talking to the converted, the government understands the importance of science and innovation, that without investing more in science and innovation, we will not become central again to the world. So I think the challenge of our discussion today is how can we basically put the centrality of Europe through science and innovation. Because you can talk about terrorism, you can talk about refugees, you can talk about the banking crisis, but without science and innovation, you'll not find the opportunities of the future. And I think that the vision for the next framework program is exactly that. Is exactly how can we find a vision that links us to the people. And that's where we got this idea of creating this mission-oriented science, because we want to get that connection back to the people. So these are the ideas that I wanted to discuss here with everyone, but I wanted just to tell you that you are part of a much bigger picture, and that sometimes we get lost in terms of just talking about the program and the future. The future is to be able to fund more science and innovation in Europe. And if we do that, we'll be able to achieve a lot. So thank you very much, and looking forward for the questions.
Thank you very much. And also a warm welcome from my side to this citizens' dialogue. And you could also call it an informal round table. And Carlos, an informal round table is a round table without a table. So that was what Henrik was referring to. I'll just introduce you to the rest of our panel. We have Jim Hagemann Snabe. Wave, so we can see you. Good. You are chairman of a number of important companies, such as AP Møller-Maersk, Siemens, and as a Bayern Munich supporter, I couldn't help noticing that you've also been affiliated to the Allianz Group, so I can already dream of tickets to the Allianz Arena. But I guess on a more serious note, at least in this context, you were a member of the high-level group on innovation. Then we have Susan Borrás. Wave. So they can see you. Good. You're a professor at the Copenhagen Business School. You participated in the interim evaluation of the 7th framework program, and we wrote our PhDs more or less at the same time, always discussing European integration. Then we have Bente Merethe Stallknecht. You're professor, head of department of biomedical science here at the university. You are a member of the scientific panel for health in relations to Horizon 2020, so a very relevant background as well. But I also saw that you have participated in the science theater, for instance, speaking on obesity and diabetes. Check it out on YouTube if you dare. And finally, we have Flemming Besenbacher. Last time I saw you, you were freezing. You were in a football stadium. I was also freezing, but you were drinking Carlsberg. But after all, you are the chairman of the Carlsberg Foundation, but also chairman and sort of the brain behind many other initiatives, such as, for instance, the Unleash initiative that started here in Copenhagen, but is now going to Singapore. The organizers have asked us to focus upon 3 questions, and the way we'll do it is that we'll have short interventions from 2 of you, and then we'd open it up for questions from you, and then the rest of the panel can also comment. And as I indicated, this is a citizens' dialogue, so that implies that citizens have to ask questions, otherwise it will be like a wine menu without wine, or Winter Olympics without snow, or university without talents. So I'll be pretty strict with you, so that we actually manage to get the questions from the audience. I'll also be strict with you. Please put up your hand, come forward with your questions, and be concrete, because this is our chance to influence the very, very important, as we just heard, ongoing debate about the next program concerning research, and we're actually influencing how then we can once again become the center of the world. So this is a big task that we have ahead of us. And you could actually also say, but that was very much also what you alluded to, Carlos, that now this issue, research, innovation, and education, has become high politics. Used to be an issue that, well, your colleagues and also Søren's colleagues dealt with, but now it's at the sort of level of the heads of state, because next month they'll be debating many of the issues that we'll also be debating. What about European Innovation Council? Is that part of the solution? What about creating a network of universities? Is that something that the heads of state should look into? The organizers have also decided that we will use Slido, so we will now do that, obviously, and you're not supposed sort of to hesitate there as well, so coming forward with your points of view. And the questions, the first question will be up here, and I hope that you have already downloaded the app. But it is the Slido app, and our sort of event code is #H2020, obviously for Horizon 2020. And the first question that we have up here is linked to the very topical issue of this network of universities. So if heads of state should agree upon this to create a future network of universities, what should be the most important part of that? And you can only answer one thing. Should it be students and staff mobility? Should it be developing a joint curriculum? Or do you think that the most important part is to establish joint agrees? It's time to vote. You vote. And let's see what happens then.
I'm going to vote too.
So far, it seems to be mobility of students and staff, but you just continue voting, and then we'll probably come back to that by the end of this session, and we'll have panelists who are able to multitask. That's very good, Carlos. Okay, so let's go straight into the first panel round, and one of the topics that also the heads of state have been asked to look into is basically how can we manage to create a better linkage between research, innovation, and education. And personally, I must admit that I've always been struck by the fact that we look upon European integration, we have Erasmus, and Erasmus is obviously about mobility, but where is actually education and excellence? So that's basically the first question that we'll have to look into. So, Your Excellency, Søren Pind, how do we do that? How do we tear down walls, to allude to a favorite president of yours, between research, innovation, and education in this new future European contact? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lykke. Well, one of the most important things is to realize, as is also based on this answer to your question, that the most important ambassadors we have for spreading knowledge, which is used for innovation, is the students and are the scientists at the universities. And that we should, as much as possible, ease their way towards spreading that knowledge into companies and foundations and so on. And I think that the idea of European universities, as presented by President Macron, is a very interesting way of trying to, on one hand, create a European identity, and on the other hand, trying to get these people working closer together, exchanging their knowledge. All should be, of course, from a Danish point of view, based on excellence. That is, you will hear me say that again and again. I have mentioned it to Carlos, I think, 221 times today, and now 3 times more. But, I mean, the structures should be based on excellence and merit. I think there's no... That is the single most important point. There's no alternative to that. And at the same time, and I see that happening, certainly in Denmark, but also over the European continent, the university environments opening up towards working together with foundations, working together with industry, and in closer cooperation. I mean, in this country, as you very well know, we see a lot of innovative companies now coming out of universities, which 20, 30 years ago was unthinkable. So closer cooperation, spreading knowledge based on excellence, bringing down the walls, and also never forgetting the European perspective. I think I mentioned that in my opening remarks.
Yeah, fine. Bente, what's your take on this? And also you look upon the importance of focusing upon education. As you can see here, I mean, the answer from our audience was very clear that 67%, well, they say that mobility of students and staff should be part of the core of the network of European universities. The floor is yours.
I think I'll be standing like in...
You're more than welcome. That's, I always prefer standing. So.
The students are the university's greatest assets. University students are generally young, resourceful, open-minded, critical, creative, and with few family obligations. And many students are eager to travel. PhD and master students can therefore act as human messengers or travelers, connecting European research laboratories and innovation hubs. One of the professors at my department is heading a European innovative training network. And this network, it connects researchers and industry across Europe via the PhD students. And all that I hear is that these networks are functioning really well. But why are they only for PhD students? Could we also create European innovation networks for master students? Another way of linking education, research, and innovation is via events, where students, researchers, and innovators are gathered at the same location in a short period of time. At the universities, we host summer schools, where national or international students and teachers are gathered at the same place. And I can easily imagine expanding that concept in a broader sense. One such large-scale innovative event was the Unleash event, headed by Professor Besenbacher in Copenhagen last year.
And Aarhus.
Cross-sector mobility requires transferable skills. Development of such skills can be built into PhD programs, and my department delivers a large number of well-educated PhDs and postdocs to the industry. What is difficult at present is to go the other way, as performance criteria in academia are centered on research publications, which is generally not the case in the industry. I'm a medical doctor by training, and my own area of expertise is health research. However, many different disciplines, several sectors, and all European countries need to collaborate to ensure health for all citizens in Europe. Center for Health Technology, or CACHE, is a successful interdisciplinary and cross-sector cooperation linking the Technical University of Denmark, University of Copenhagen, the capital region of Denmark, and the city of Copenhagen. In this center, PhD students are grounded and co-supervised by health and technology researchers. And the research projects are grounded in end-user organizations and aim to develop new solutions to the healthcare system and innovative projects for companies. It might not be easy for researchers to cross both borders, disciplines, and sectors. Therefore, I would suggest setting up a European network of national, interdisciplinary, and cross-sector teams to carry out missions of importance for European citizens and the rest of the world.
So as far as I could hear, sort of what you were saying, the final point was that there's a linkage here in your thinking between the missions that we'll be debating in the next round, and then this particular topic regarding education. So one could actually imagine sort of a matrix with regards to that. Now it's your turn. What is the overall sort of importance here with regards to linking education to research innovation? Any ideas specifically? We just heard some that are important also for the commissioners to take back home. One could also have the sort of point of view that, well, isn't that actually happening already? I mean, what on earth do we need sort of a new European university network for? I mean, that would sort of be the provocative question from me if I had absolutely no idea about this. Being a complete normal citizen here in Denmark, they're called Mr. and Mrs. Jensen, I would say this university must cooperate with tons of sort of other universities. So what is actually sort of what's new here, Mr. Commissioner? Where's the beef? And now it's your turn, so let me see some hands.
Okay,
yeah?
I can talk just to fill the blank of the question, because I'm the first Erasmus commissioner. And so Erasmus, for me, was everything that changed in my life. I was 20 years old, come from a small town in the south of Portugal. My traveling was basically get the car and go to Spain and get some chocolates and go back to Portugal. I never had really taken a plane. And that moment of my life changed me deeply. Of being able to go to Paris and without money, basically with these 16,000 French francs check on my pocket, to see the world. And you know, it was the European Union touching me directly I had the European Union in my pocket with a check of 16,000 francs. And what we lost in these 20 years is that the European Union is not anymore in my pocket. That link in between the European Union and the person is not there anymore in the same way. So these projects of getting around, call it a European university or a network of universities, this is not about the university. This is about linking directly people to the European project. And so I think that it's, again, much bigger than that. And if you look historically, what we're missing is that we don't have this way of teaching our kids what Europe is and what Europe is doing for them. And so I really like the idea of the network, but I see it as, one, to touch people directly, and second, an opportunity also to think what we want it to be in terms of the future. What are we going to teach? Is it to keep the same structure that we have today? What are we going to change deeply in education to teach people for professions that do not exist exist yet? They will exist in the future. How do you do that? So I see that as an opportunity, a huge opportunity for Europe. And if I had to put my money in something that really is worth it, I think this is worth it for Europe, absolutely.
And referring to the Erasmus program and just confirming your point that it's so much more about the studying abroad, but you already know that 1 million babies have so far come out of the Erasmus program, so students that are meeting each other. And now here we have our first question. Please rise and then state your name and affiliation.
Good.
Hello, my name is from Aalborg University, professor in computer science. So we just had the launch of the strategy for digital growth in Denmark, so that's interesting. And there is a big need of digital skills, which is sort of explained very well in this initiative. So I was thinking, what about lifelong education? I mean, where does that fit? I mean, and I think that's absolutely necessary if you want to go to really be successful in innovation, that you invest in not just educating our kids and people that study at university, but have a long life perspective.
Was there someone over here? No? So then we have a question on lifelong learning, and then I also look at the rest of the panel, whether you had any sort of thoughts on this particular sort of topic that we're debating now. Who would like to respond to the lifelong learning? Could that also be part of the European Universities Network, or should it be perceived in a smaller way? Mr. Besenbacher.
Thank you, Løkke. Well, there's no question that lifelong learning will be a key ingredient in the European educational system. And I have recently been spoken about in Denmark. We talked about a very flexible labor market and talk about flexicurity. And started to talk about flexication. We should have a much more flexible education system. And that applies basically throughout the education system. And I firmly believe that actually universities in the long run will have to give away for given degrees, but actually giving credit for courses. Because I honestly believe that many students in the future will, first of all, travel around, take one semester, 1 year at one university, travel to the next university. They may take some online courses. They may actually go out in industry and work for half a year. Because, I mean, the huge amount of students we educate at universities should actually not be civil servants. They should actually go out and get a job in industry. And for example, in Denmark, when we educate a huge amount of PhD students, the majority of them would actually not be associate and full professors. They should actually get out and get a job. So therefore, actually engaging industry in the long life education, I think is incredibly important. And I think Europe could be leading here because there's, I mean, universities are doing great, European education system is great, but there's also a lot of silos. And we should actually also in the future break down these silos, both within the given country, but also actually having people traveling around and having curriculum which matches. If I would like to study half a year in Copenhagen, then I go to Paris and I get credit for that year I studied in Copenhagen. So flexication, I think, is going to be incredibly important in the Europe going forward.
Jim, and then Søren, another question. Jim?
Yeah, and I think the issue is extremely important. Not only do we not have the skills necessary for a digital future today, if you project out, you know the size of the problem is pretty significant. It's like having the boats but not having the sailors to sail the boats. It doesn't help much to have the boats. I think the bigger issue there is that the change of skill needs will make either many people irrelevant, and the consequences of that will be quite devastating. So there is a huge task in taking current workforce, not just young people, but current workforce, and repurposing the skills and revitalizing that. I don't think that can be done purely from a university point of view. It takes too long before we get to that. So I actually, as an industrialist, I see companies playing a very important role in not just restructuring companies and in letting people go, but giving people opportunities and retraining people. I think that's a collaboration necessary where the large companies play a major role.
Søren, and then we move to the next question.
Well, as the professor probably knows, the government has set up a disruption council. And to start with, this was a plan on the big reforms and tax structures and whatever. And then what we find ourselves discussing is education and how to.
Politics.
And one of our biggest problems, challenges, is exactly the question on lifelong learning and what you do after people take their university degree, be it a master or a PhD. Because if we look into the future, and that's a hard thing to do, and there are big risks of mistakes. But if you look at what very smart people say, they say that we see into a future where people will change the way they work 5 or 6 times during life expectancy. And our systems are not prepared for that. I think that in the future you will see the meaning of the word alma mater mean something completely different. It will be a place where you come to and go from much more often. And Carlos, maybe we should discuss that much more in a European context. The problem, of course, is that what we in Danish call after education, there's a large private market on that. And will that be seen as competition? There are some dilemmas, but we have to address it. And it's really an important issue in this. And might I add one last point? And that is, there is a large part of people currently working who do not know anything about data. And we need to find a way to change that fact. Because being a humanist in 10 years without having any knowledge about how to use data will mean that you have 0 possibilities. It will also mean that if you are an engineer without any understanding of the human knowledge, that's also a tough call. But we need to do something in that aspect. Find a way to lift up the generations who are actually data analphabets. And I'm sorry to say, I actually count myself in that.
We go down here. Yes, please. Just stand up and get the microphone. State your name and affiliation. And then we also have Susanna in this round. Yeah?
Yeah, my name is Maria Skov. I'm heading the international section at Danish Standards, but I have been working at Danish universities before, so I have a little bit of experience. I think we have good working mobility schemes across Europe. I mean, the Erasmus is working. All universities have very nice exchange programs that are doing quite a lot for the students. But I think what we see now and what I see among my own children is that the new generations, they're thinking completely different. They don't want to do a degree at KU or DTU or TU Munich or whatever. They want to meet the professor in mathematics at TU Munich. They want to meet the linguistics guy at Cambridge. And they want to pick and choose and get the best out of what they can see around the globe. So I think we need to accommodate for that need, that they want to, I don't want to call it shop around, but they want to get the best out of the education system around the globe. So I support fully what Flemming says, but also how do we break down the barriers? Because they meet a lot of obstacles yet in terms of getting transfer of merits, getting to know how to pick the right courses. How do we break down the obstacles at national level, but also among universities?
So personalized education, basically. Susanna, did you want to respond? But also you had other points, I'm sure.
Yes, one short point. I come from a business school. And I think that, of course, knowing data and how to use it is actually very important. And also shopping around, that's actually our reality already. We see students coming in and out. What actually really makes me think is, what we need to have much more business models education. And it goes to the humanities and it goes to the technical sciences. I mean, I think that the ability of our students to understand that their future jobs, that perhaps they have to create it themselves. And they have to be, they're going to be in and out of different jobs and in and out of different sectors. So they need to kind of understand that. So this kind of much more hands-on and taking much more the kind of business model education. Mm-hmm.
Carlos, you get the final word in this round?
I think that the point is, what can we change? If you look at a very simple statistics that there's now a lot of studies being done about it, that 65% of the kids that get into primary education today will work in professions that do not exist yet. I think that the question is, how do you prepare people for that? Because our parents prepared us for a profession, for being a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. And what are we doing in terms of that preparation for the future? So I really like the idea of Flemming, that was also raised, of flex education. I think probably one of the best examples I've seen is in Carnegie Mellon, where students just pick and choose. I mean, if you like music and you like physics, why can't you have a degree in music and physics? By the way, Fabiola Gianotti, one of the best physicists in the world, Director General of the CERN, she's a musician and she's a physicist, and I think that giving that freedom within the boundaries, because it cannot be chaotic. You have to learn the basics, you have to learn the core, but then giving that is extremely important for that project of the European University. And I think that we are not doing enough about it. I was listening about the digital, just wrapping up here on a second very quick point of the digital skills. I'm a believer that one of the things that probably professors like you are not yet doing is, how do you prepare people for the intersection in between the digital and the physical world? And so you have now a lot of people that are prepared in terms of knowing how to do the digital thing. Others are very good in the mechanical physical world. But where are the people that know the intersection? Those people. So that's, I think, absolutely crucial for the future, because the problems that you get today is that a lot of people know the data, but they don't know the physical. Some people know the physical, but they don't know about the data, and that is something that we have to be very focused for the future of this project of a European university. I like the idea of having a stamp of a European university, something that is European. Stefan Zweig in 1932 or 34 wrote an article called Disintoxication of Europe, and he was the first to talk about it, saying that one of the problems is that people were basically not talking in between European countries and putting people together. So this idea is very old, but it's very good. And there's so many things that are good and obvious, we don't do it. And so we should probably...
So the time of the old idea has finally come now here in 2018. Thank you very much. We move to the second round. And I cannot resist telling a very short anecdote about an American president. No, it's not Ronald Reagan, it's JFK. In '61, Carlos knows this one already, when JFK visited the NASA headquarters for the first time, he toured the facility and, polite as he was, introduced himself to the janitor who was mopping the floor and asked him, "What are you doing here at NASA?" And what did the janitor reply? "Mr. President, I'm helping to put a man on the moon." So this was definitely a man who was on a mission. And that is our second topic, mission-oriented research. Can we somehow learn from that? Should we also have missions? I mean, not necessarily like putting a man on the moon or a woman on the moon. It could be other, obviously should be other sort of overall missions. Should that be part of the next sort of program when we look upon what Europe should look into? And here we also have a question, and it's very topical because a new report just came out last week on mission-oriented research and innovation. And basically, we are asked, sort of, if we now decide to move into this new idea of mission-oriented approach, sort of, what should be the most relevant criteria that then we should choose these various missions on the basis of. So that could be bold and inspirational with wide societal relevance, just to name one, but as you can see, the others are sort of put up there. But, Carlos, I remember receiving while you vote, a summary from the last European Council in December, and people were basically telling me, it may not be true, that yes, there was sort of broad support for the idea of having European missions. So ein Ding müssen wir haben. But we don't really know what it's all about.
Yep.
So what is it all about? How would we actually sort of agree upon these missions, and what could these missions be? And obviously here there are some new splendid ideas in this report. But to the citizens here, what are you talking about when you refer to European missions? Floor is yours.
I'm talking about creating purpose, that people understand really what we do. And I think that if we want more investment in science and innovation, you have to link that to citizens. And today's citizens, they really don't know what we do. We know in this room, we know what we do, but citizens don't understand what our projects are about. We invest 1 billion for 10 years in mapping the brain, but do people really understand what that means? Probably not. And I think the missions is about that, is that Europe is very good as defining the challenges. So we know the challenges. We know climate change is a challenge. We know obesity is a challenge. We know what are the challenges that we have. But then we're not good at defining the missions that are below that challenges, so we can have projects that basically contribute to the solution. And so what I'm telling about is really very simple things. It's about the language. And then people will be proud of us, you know, if you solve something that people understand. And so one of the examples we give in the book is about dementia. If I can put as a mission that we will have a mission of reducing the progression of dementia by 50%, people understand that. And so the point is that some of you don't like this idea because it's too granular. And so you say, oh, but if you do that, you're not going to do that. But no, I will do so many other things. I mean, Nixon in the 70s defined curing cancer as a mission, and he didn't really achieve that. But there were so many of that went into HIV, and some of the things that we now save millions of people with HIV is about that mission of curing cancer. So it's not about the mission, it's about creating the dynamics in society, it's about putting people talking about it. I was telling Søren, I was actually talking this morning about something that happened to us this year. You know, at some point I was in Lisbon, and I saw in all the news, NASA discovered 7 new planets and 3 in an inhabitable place. And I said, again, I mean, the Americans did it and we don't. So I called Jean-Pierre Bourguignon at the European Research Council and I said, what's going on? The Americans did it. And he said, no, this is a guy from Liège. This is Michael Gillen. He works for Université de Liège. He has a grant from the European Research Council. And the only thing he did was to rent a telescope because he didn't have a telescope. And so I called the guy and he said, no, it's me. It's my project. It's your money. And, you know, and it's very frustrating because, you know, we lost an opportunity where all the world thought was NASA. I have nothing against NASA. I'm very happy for NASA, and they have a huge and fantastic communication team. But we lost that because we don't feel the sense of purpose of communicating that people. If we had that mission, let's imagine a mission that we'll find a place outside our planet that we can at some point inhabit. I mean, how proud would we be that we have achieved this mission? So it's not a lot, it's not very complicated, and probably because of that people are a bit intrigued, but there's not more than that.
Are you intrigued, Flemming? Or can you sort of see this idea of mission sort of being part and parcel of the next budget?
Absolutely, and I'm not a politician, but I really do believe that the next EU budget, the most important thing there is really investing in research, innovation, and education. And Carlos said before that the people do not know what scientists are doing. I would actually add on to say that that finance ministers do not know what scientists are doing. Because actually I think in order to convince them that they should actually invest more in research and innovation, we have to have this purpose discussion, why are we doing it? And we have simply been not good enough in telling stories, telling simple stories about why science is relevant. And I mean, we are living in a world today where it's a much better world than it was 30 or 50 years ago, and that not least due to this investment in research and innovation. So I think Europe should really invest in this year, and there's a few things I would like to add. First of all, I would say that if I look back in Europe, there's one instrument which I think has been very successful and we should still invest heavily in, and that's the ERC, European Research Council, and the programs there. This is what I call blue fundamental research. We should certainly have room for that. But for the more mission-oriented research, I think we have so much grand challenges both in Europe and in the world, and I don't have to mention water or energy and climate change and all these things. And the only way we can tackle these things is actually developing new technologies. So therefore we have to do it. But it should be, first of all, a program which is focused on one simple thing. That's excellent. We should never compromise on excellence. I fully agree with Søren said before. It should be a program which is actually simple to use, simple to explain, and simple to administer. Because I think also it's fair to say that many of the EU program has simply been too bureaucratic. We should have a much simpler and lean way into these application of EU programs. We should not have all the different programs we have today. I think we should create a much more simple program where people either can come with big consortia, it can be smaller group, it can be SMEs, but they should not use a lot of consultant people's time and money to find out where to apply for. We should have a much simpler way into the EU system. And then again, I think actually that we as scientists should go out and communicate much better what we're doing. There will be issues like personalized medicine here, which really change the whole medical area as I see it, right? The whole sequences of the genome, right? Remember what it costs to sequence the first human genome, and now you can maybe in 5 or 10 years' time do it for $1, right? I mean, it's incredible what impact it will have. But again, if I travel around in the world, I mean, we're going from 7 to 10 billion people. Can we feed 10 billion people? Do we have clean water for 10 billion people? There's a lot of new technology which had to be developed, coupling these missions also to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And then finally, getting scientists and professors out of these silos at universities and actually interacting with the rest of society, and not least also with business.
Was that an intervention? And then please, let's hear some. There must also be some people who are sort of slightly critical of this new mission concept. Who decides it, and is it top-down, whatever? But please answer, and then we'll go down here and over here. Yeah?
I think there's one question we should ask ourselves. Why do we do this? And
that's always
of course
relevant.
it's to the betterment of human life and all this, but it's actually also a defense for our way of living. Now see, in dictatorships, these things are done very easily. They collect all their resources. It is decided by a very small amount of typically men who decide that this should be done, and they use it for propaganda purpose, and they also use it to enhance the prestige of their countries. That's hard to do in democracies. But people still need inspiration. And I think that it's, as long as what is at stake, I think the Commissioner said it very well. He said now Europe is 20% of the world economy, America is 20%, China is 20%. I think we should think very carefully, not only leave the inspirational platforms to other people and let them define what inspiration is. This is actually the continent of free speech. This is the continent of free thought. We should defend that, and we should defend it in a way where excellence is not attacked, but where there is room for inspiration.
Brilliant. So down here, yes, please, yes.
Thank you. My name is Marcel Bogers. I'm a professor of innovation and entrepreneurship at the University of Copenhagen. One of my research interests also really lies in the domain of how can we better understand and address some of the grand challenges that Flemming also mentioned. And one of the observations is that we really need new ways of organizing and new organizational forms in order to actually address those challenges, because they are very complex, uncertain. We need to bring multiple disciplines together. So on the one hand, a little bit like the commissioner saying that our kids, they don't know yet in which jobs they work, so maybe we have to solve some of these problems in organizations or ways of organizing that we have not really experienced so far. So that's also a little bit my question maybe to some of the panelists about, okay, how are you thinking about this notion? How are you practically trying to address this uncertainty when we want to have these big missions, when we want to address these big societal challenges also from an organizational point of view?
And then we had a gentleman over here. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Benedict Wexel, the ambassador of Switzerland and Denmark. Forgive me for using your time as a representative of a non-member state. But I think in research...
You are a citizen, and this is citizen dialogue. Yeah.
With the humble Søren in Geneva and some other Swiss contributions to research, I think I'm entitled to give one critical and a positive remark. Until 15th of March, you can auction the first letter Steve Jobs wrote to get a job. You would have thrown this letter directly into the waste paper basket. At college, when he dropped out, he still visited some courses in apparently in music and calligraphy. And a few days ago, I was here at the Leo Innovation Lab, and he showed me how with a smartphone, with an Apple smartphone, you can better detect a skin disease than 60% of doctors. So what was his mission? Probably we also should leave some space for creativity and really, but probably they need really good infrastructure and the best material, like the research in Liège, that he has all the means at his disposal. And then I think if there's one mission, I think every researcher in every field would be able to agree it is the SDGs. And I think if we have a mission, then it is to strengthen the UN and to help achieve these goals, because they're not only development goals, they're also our goals, because we also have to get into a sustainable development in our societies and economies. And I think if we can convince the people that everything the researchers do in one way or another contributes to one of the SDGs, I think you can easily explain why you need more money for research.
And that is actually also mentioned in the new report, I mean, the SDGs, and it was also mentioned in the Pascal Lamy report called Lab Fab App, that the SDGs could be part and parcel of the missions. Jim, I saw you and I saw Carlos, and I don't know whether I overlooked anyone. Yes?
Yes, well, I think actually the questions may actually be linked somehow. Maybe I start with the last one, which is, should you direct? I actually think Steve Jobs, as an example, had a vision. He had a purpose. He wanted to use technology to inspire people. And so there was something driving him. It wasn't randomness. And I actually believe, as a technologist, I've spent 25 years of my career in technology, that we're at a point in history where if we don't direct what we want to use technology for, technology may take over and be used for things which may not be good for society. It may actually create a very unstable society. So it's not clear that if we just let technology choose where it goes, that's a better future. It is clear to me that if we choose what to use technology for and which problems to solve with it, the future can be significantly better. And I think that's key in the direction. The second question was about how do you organize? And I've been part of large organizations. I've come to the realization that the biggest problem we have is that we tend to want to plan things. That's where creativity is killed. So I actually think that what you need is a big dream, a purpose, something that says, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, but no direction on how to do it. And the modern ways of organizing, a lot of that I learned in software is Scrum iterations, independent teams. There's not a long description of what needs to get done, but they know what problem they're trying to solve, and they learn in the process. And that is a fundamental shift of the way we manage and lead. We tend to want to plan things, and every time we plan, we limit the outcome to our current imagination. And so we got to stop planning, and we got to unleash human creativity, but maybe direct in which direction are we trying to extract that creativity.
Bente and then Carlos, and we move to next round.
Yeah, regarding the missions, I really like that approach. And you talk about technology, and we have these STEM researchers, but we also have the social science and humanity researchers. And I think that the mission approach is a very good way of interconnecting all kinds of researchers, because you ask a question, and then the different researchers will have to contribute, each from their side, each with their creativity and bottom up. So how to organize was the question from down here. How to organize? We need to create some missions, and then all the researchers and students from the different areas, they will go together to solve these questions. So we need to set up structures where all the researchers can come together from the different angles.
Carlos?
I wanted, first of all, to acknowledge Marcel there. Marcel put me in contact with my first professor of innovation, my dear friend Henry Chesbrough, which is the father of open innovation. And he gave me the great pleasure to be the author of one scientific article with Marcel and Anne Chesbrough, and that was really a big privilege and one of the highest points of my political career, to say that I wrote a scientific article with two great professors. So thank you for that, Marcel, publicly. And I think that was really a great thing. The field that Hans Chesbrough brought us, this idea of open innovation, is something that we have applied today in business, but we are not applying yet in government and supranational organizations. And I think that your question goes exactly to that, Marcel. How can we basically have the same kind of organizational structure in governments and also at the supranational level at the European Union for things to work? So, for instance, I come basically with a portfolio where everything I do depends on my colleagues. So if it's in a vertical way that I work, I cannot achieve anything, because a lot of innovation is about regulation, is about how can I change regulation. That's not of my responsibility. So how do we open the system to get inputs not just from your colleagues, but also from the outside world? If you think about regulation in the future, you cannot be just you, politician, regulating, because what do you know? What products do you know in the future? You're going to do wrong things. And so you have to co-create and co-regulate with the outside world. So I really like that idea. And then the ambassador of Switzerland, which is a part of the European family of research in science and innovation, and we're very proud of the participation of Switzerland. I think that you brought to the table the great example of Steve Jobs. I think that Steve Jobs had, and I agree with Jim, the vision. And his vision was about a world where the intersection of the arts and the sciences were the most powerful weapon. And I think that that vision of Steve Jobs was unique. But you have to give freedom to people to innovate. So the idea of the missions is a little bit like that. You have the European Research Council, which is totally bottom-up, freedom to scientists. You will have the European Innovation Council that will give freedom to innovators, centered on the innovator, no disciplines, no topics. You do what you have to do. But that's not enough. You need to have on the top some guidance, some direction, because innovation is not just about the rate, but also a direction. And what Jim was, I think, getting to on the technology point is that if you don't give that direction, things probably will never happen. And I think that I was thinking about Steve Jobs when he created the first Macintosh. There's a beautiful story that he had so much attention to detail, and he's like, Jim can also talk a little bit about this thing, because he told me this story at some point, that he was designing the Macintosh, and really 1 week before the Macintosh was about to be sold, he looked at the inside of the box of the Macintosh, and he saw that the wires were really ugly. I mean, the whole thing was messy. And he said to the engineers, look, we cannot sell the Macintosh with this mess of wires inside. And the guy said, but why? Why? And he basically told the story to this guy that when he was a kid, he was painting the fence in his house, and there was a part of the fence that he didn't paint. And his father came to him and said, why didn't you paint that? And Steve Jobs said, Dad, but that side of the fence, nobody will ever see it, so it's not worth it. And the father said, but you will know about it. And when he looked at the engineer, he said, look, it's going to be inside, but you will know it's a mess. So I want it beautiful, even if nobody will ever see it. And I think that was an amazing vision. That was freedom, but there was also discipline and direction. And at some point, I want to see these ways. So I think it's very, very, very inspirational what you said. And the SDGs are on the top. The SDGs are challenges. Below those challenges, you have to create. Because, Ambassador, if I ask you, do you know what's SDG number 13? I don't. I don't remember, 14 or 15. So the challenges are too broad. Is it too broad? So we have to take the missions as something that is below the SDGs, and we can be the implementers of the SDGs through the missions, but with the language that people don't forget. And I'm a big fan of the SDGs.
Good. We move to the last round because we have about a quarter of an hour left. So we now will be debating Europe is back. So it's innovation, that is the topic. And this is the report that was published by the high-level group. And Jim, you served on that high-level group on innovation. And you came forward with the group with a number of sort of suggestions. What should a possible European Innovation Council, what should they sort of focus upon? What would be the most relevant sort of new ideas here? Should it, for instance, be a strategic advisory board? That sounds pretty banal, I would say. I mean, obviously you need to have a strategic advisory board, but obviously there are also other issues up here. And to start with you while you vote, what was actually your answer? What is the most important thing about the European Innovation Council? And do we really need new institutions?
Well, I think the question we asked ourselves, and I was quite privileged to be part of a group of people from business, innovators, policy, that Carlos had put together, a very diverse group. The question we asked ourselves is, how can we boost innovation in Europe? And I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, do we have enough ideas in Europe? We actually believe yes. We have a lot of ideas in Europe. We have actually a history of Europe taking the lead on very significant technological advancements in the past. I think the whole industrialization started in Europe. The GSM, even the NMT mobile standard was invented here in the Nordics. The GSM was rolled out first in Europe. The CERN project produced the World Wide Web. I mean, these are very significant innovations that came out of Europe. So the question is that we ask ourselves is, so if we have enough ideas, why are we losing out? Why are we losing out to the Americans and probably the Chinese a little bit later? And what will it take to boost that? And to a large extent, we came to the conclusion that we need to take ideas into scale at a broader sense than what we've had in the past. So, you know, this being a citizen meeting, I actually looked up on Twitter this morning to see, well, there was a comment on one of your tweets, actually, on the question of what can we do to boost innovation in Europe. And a guy called Aman Vincent, he said, ignite young minds. That was his response. I thought that was very inspirational. And again, the question is, do we have enough ideas? I believe so. How do we get scale? Well, the problem we have is that when the big ideas turn out to be really big ideas, many of the young, ignited people move to Silicon Valley to realize their dream. That's the problem. So how do we make Europe attractive? How do we create an environment in Europe where we are more attractive to not just get the idea, but to scale the idea? Those were the questions we asked ourselves. And to some extent, the conclusions of the report are quite simple. First of all, we believe we need, besides the top-down, we need a bottom-up opportunity. We need to have enough ideas and bottom-up approaches to capture those. Number two, we do think that the easy problems are probably finding their own way. Those problems where you have a relatively simple solution that can be fast applied. So our focus was around the deep tech challenges, where it takes more effort to actually come up with big solutions, but with that, probably also a bigger opportunity at the end. And one of the ideas that we had was that we believe that speed becomes essential to success in the future. We've had the industrialization where size was the most important, and therefore we saw industrialization move from Europe to the US and eventually to China. And we think speed is more important in the digital age because of the speed of technology. So we said, what if Europe could have the benefit of being little countries at high speed combined with the network effect that we could create in Europe, because you need the scale of the network in order to really have an opportunity. And that's very much in line with some of the recommendations that we have. I would say that coming back to Armand Vincent's idea, saying that we should ignite young minds, I would maybe adjust that to say we should connect ignited young minds. And the connection is, I think, what will accelerate Europe as an innovator.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually also part of the answer up here, because we need a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation system, communicate data, findings, recommendations to a wide audience and demonstrate what EU support can accomplish. So there is something about connecting people and sort of also disseminating knowledge and hence also ideas. Susanna, what's your take on a possible European Innovation Council?
Well, I mean, I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased because, we have been talking about the, innovation paradox for many years, too many years, I think, far too many. So I think it's about time.
A little less conversation, a little more action. As
exactly.
Yeah. Don't sing now, please. Yeah, sorry.
But I mean, let me start with your story about this, the 1400s, the Chinese emperor and the brave young man that actually took the small boats and discovered America. There are three elements in the story that I like very much and that I want to kind of, link back to what I want to say. One is that there are young, brave men at that point, but it could have been also women. And that is actually focusing on the people. And that is actually quite interesting because they were actually the one who were defeating, all the kind of unknown, taking actually out there, and they were actually the will of these individuals who actually really wanted to make that kind of, adventure. And I think it is actually very good from the European Innovation Council is that it's actually person and people focused. It's not about the grand ideas that you said, before. It's also about the individual people, which is actually something like what the European Research Council does with researchers. Now it's about time to do it with the innovators. The second element that comes from your story, from the the Portuguese discoverers, was actually that it is about taking risks. I think that, of course, we all take risks, researchers take risks, but innovators take even more risk because there's so much in terms of their own time, their own success, and that is actually I think that the European Innovation Council is likely to be much more risk for you also as a politician, for your political capital, but also more risky than the European Research Council. I mean, and I think that is actually what we actually need is to actually have this kind of Europe willing to take risks, and I think it's also about time. And the third dimension, I think, is about navigating. Because perhaps your young, brave men were not on the top of the technology, but they were very good sailors. They knew how to navigate even in unknown waters. And that actually brings me to the main point that I want to say today, which is actually we have something that is called accelerators. And then for those of you who do not know, accelerators are short-term programs, something like 3 to 6 months, where potential innovators, potential entrepreneurs are put together to develop their ideas. These people come in and have an idea, but they don't have a business plan. They don't have money. They don't know how to do it. But they're brought together, and they're actually very intensively coached in order to make that idea become reality. And not only that, they become very strongly networked with each other, and they become very strongly networked with venture capitalists. Venture capitalists. And I think that we haven't spoke about that money earlier. And I think that is actually, that was one of the elements that I think could be actually quite interesting to consider within the European Innovation Council, because acceleration is actually what will bring these ideas into fruition, and will bring those brave technologists in contact with the potential capital and willing to take those risks. So I will say it's not about boosting, it's also, it's about accelerating. So, Mr. Moedas, please accelerate Europe.
Yes, I have before. Yeah, okay, yeah, and then we move on then. Yeah, please.
No, I was just saying that the story in the 1400s was the Portuguese and the Spanish.
Well done. A true diplomat here. We have, yes, a question from down there, and we have about 7 minutes left before the rest of us will have drinks, and the commissioner, unfortunately, has to go to the airport, apparently. Yeah.
Right.
Please go ahead. State your name and affiliation.
This is on work. Yes.
Yes.
My name is Lisbeth Breinholt. I'm with the research support at IT University of Copenhagen. And one thing I'm wondering a bit about when I'm reading this brilliant report about portfolio management and turning research into innovation, having a value chain from ERC to the European Innovation Council, that's a brilliant idea. Only one thing is missing, and that's the people. You're talking about innovation and about being people-centric. One thing I like about researchers is that they love to do research. And it's my job to help them do that. Not a lot of them wants to do business. And I think we've got ourselves a problem here, leading to the first part of our discussion today, which was education. Why are we making researchers teach at universities? Well, research-based university is important, yes, but we need more training in entrepreneurship. We want to make it possible for master's students to think themselves as innovators. We work a lot with that at the IT University in Copenhagen. We've got innovation groups and labs and things like that, but when it comes to it, the researchers themselves find that sometimes they lose their students to production, meaning that they are no longer productive in the scientific sense. And that we need to change. Thank you.
Thank you much. We'll move over here.
Yes, thank you. My name is Ragnar Nielsen. I work with the Danish GTS institutes, that's RTOs in EU lingo. I have a question about, when we look at the bottom-up programs, we have the ERC, where we have the knowledge dissemination. There is very clear. Researchers write articles. But in the EIC, with your bottom-up approach there, what is the thoughts about knowledge dissemination? How do we secure that the large infant number of European SMEs actually can access this knowledge developed in the EIC projects, so that I can understand the Commissioner's thoughts about touching the single European with a grant, but how do we get a wider impact from these projects and get the knowledge out and work on a much broader basis than the single SME? Thank you.
And the final question goes to the Polish ambassador. Yes, the microphone is
Thank you very much, Henryka Maszczycka-Dendes, the ambassador of Poland. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. I was struck by the fact that always when we meet in the European format, we discuss councils, committees, structures, procedures, bureaucracy, etc. And thank you, Jim, for mentioning that many of the best innovations of recent years were actually European innovations. You haven't mentioned Skype, which I think is a quite good example. But somehow we don't manage to keep them in Europe. And I think an issue which we should discuss here is with innovations, it's not only the entrepreneurial aspects, the research as such, it's also the size of the market. And in Europe, something we miss is the European research area. We still largely EU 28 member states and not a research area. The Estonian presidency recently tried to introduce the fifth freedom, the freedom of movement of data, which I think is quite crucial. We actually, I mean, what we're losing in Europe, or where we're losing, is the fact that the innovators and small companies, startups, are faced with a very difficult legal reality. And I think a way forward and a way of starting to catch up and not lose against the US. I mean, all of our innovators go to the Silicon Valley or to Asia. One way of not losing them would be actually to create them a bigger market and an easier way of operating in the EU as such. Thank you very much.
So very short. Jim, do you want to reply?
So I think many things came up. I'll just summarize. I think we have the biggest opportunity ever to create a future that's significantly better than what it is today. It will require more than movement of goods and people. It will require the movement of ideas. And the thing is that structures around innovation cannot be bureaucratic. Bureaucracies kill ideas, kill scale. So somehow we need to create frameworks. We need to create the vision of which problems are we trying to solve, and then we got to unleash human potential. And that's the essence of what we try to do with the EIC, is to create environments where we can connect people with great ideas, we can share the good ideas so we accelerate the innovation, and we can create open markets in Europe that are big enough so that we can scale in Europe and beyond. I think that's the vision that we had, and it's not going to be easy. As a father of teenage kids, this is the essence of creating opportunities for people in Europe. With that comes growth, and with that comes a better Europe and a better world. It's an incredible opportunity, and we have to lead that.
That's it, because otherwise you will miss your plane and we won't have our drinks, you know, so first things first. Thank you very much, and particularly thank you also to you, Carlos, for coming here and sort of stimulating the debate in Denmark on European issues, but obviously particularly on European research. This was just the beginning, because now the overall debate sort of continues on the new multi-annual budget, and hopefully sort of when the next budget period runs out from the next multi-annual period, your successor, Carlos, will receive a phone call. And the message will be something like this: Houston, tranquility base here, the eagle has landed. With these few words, thank you very much for coming. Let's give it a hand. And drinks are served in that direction. So that's